Coming up, Dortmund lap-up victory at St James's Park and Eddie Howe faces up to injury crisis. So the morning after Newcastle lost to Borussia Dortmund in Champions League Group F, before the game the group was looking very rosy indeed for Newcastle fans. Newcastle sitting top and knowing they could take a big step towards the last 16 of the competition. But Dortmund obviously had other ideas. Dortmund had to win the game last night, and I think everybody was well aware of that. But for me, I think Newcastle still put in a good performance. I said that last night. I've had a look back now at the game and I don't feel any different. I think Newcastle, a little bit unfortunate to go 1-0 down just towards the end of the first half. I said at the time that I felt Newcastle just needed to get in and have a little bit of a chat with Eddie Howe in the dressing room for the second half. I think if that game is 0-0 at half time, the second half could have been completely different with Newcastle shooting down the slope and pushing for the win. But in the end, they were chasing an equaliser and sadly they couldn't find it. So I thought they were a bit unfortunate to be a goal down at half time. I do take on board Nick Pope made, I think, 2 or 3 good saves actually to keep Newcastle at bay. But look, that's what he's there for, and that's what he's brilliant at. So it wasn't anything out the ordinary, really, Nick Pope making saves, because he's been doing it ever since he got here. So that was a positive still for me. Newcastle had chances as well at the other end. Anthony Gordon testing the keeper a couple of times. But I think, look, the second half, I think you can take a lot of solace from that as a Newcastle fan. I think Eddie Howe will take a lot of solace. It was a night of adversity because things went wrong for Newcastle. You look at the injury situation. We'd already lost Alexander Isak. Newcastle tried to make changes by bringing on Jacob Murphy and he went off within 5 minutes. So there was 2 big blows there. Then after the game, we discovered Elliot Anderson is going to be out with a back injury. And of course, you've got the ongoing Tonali thing. It's just prolonging the agony for Newcastle, waiting for this ban to come through, which it's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. And Newcastle are just going to have to get on with it. But to potentially be 4 players down going into this Wolves game is just unbelievable, really. And it's something Newcastle have to face up to going into the game at Molineux on Saturday night. Now, looking at individual performances last night, I think Nick Pope was really good. I know I said that's what he's there for, make saves, but you can do it well, and he did it very well. So for me, he was probably man of the match because he just kept Newcastle in contention. I thought Anthony Gordon was also very good indeed. I think some players picked up in the second half, and really, Callum Wilson, when he came on second half, actually did cause a few threats as well. So it wasn't all negativity. Newcastle have lost the game in the Champions League. It was always going to be tough. Looking at the group now, Newcastle on 4 points behind Dortmund because of obviously losing the game last night. Those are the rules, and we've got to now go to another tough fixture away from home in Dortmund. Never easy. I haven't fully checked Dortmund's record in the Champions League at home, but I'm pretty sure it's quite good. Obviously, the yellow wall and you'll never walk alone, all that goes with it. It's going to be a huge atmosphere over there in Germany in 2 weeks' time. And Newcastle know that they've got to go there and get something. Now, are they going to go there and win? Well, it would be one of the best results in the club's history if they can beat Dortmund at their own stadium. But a point would be huge as well, taking Newcastle on at 5 points with 2 games to spare. Defeat would leave things really in the balance for Newcastle, and it would no longer be in their hands. They then might find themselves playing with AC Milan for that final Europa League slot, which you do get if you finish 3rd. So even if Newcastle don't get one of the top 2 and go into the last 16, they'd still be in Europe. They'd be in the Europa League. It wouldn't be the end of the world. I think I heard a lot of people before Any game was played in this group, saying that they would take being in the Europa League. For me, I'd like to see Newcastle and push on the last 16 first and take that as a consolation if it does come to pass. But Newcastle can't be disheartened. 4 points from the opening 3 games isn't a bad tally. You look around at other groups, there's other teams struggling worse than Newcastle, and they've made a really good account themselves coming back into European football for the first time in 10 years since Alan Pardew era, and the first time in the Champions League for 20 years. So it's still an education for Newcastle. It's very much an education for Eddie Howe and his coaching staff. And it's now about getting the balance right going into this game against Wolves at the weekend. And yeah, the unbeaten run came to an end last night. You know, it was 8 games unbeaten before that after the bad start when Newcastle lost 3 games in a row. But Newcastle recovered from that, and I think they can recover again facing Wolves at the weekend. I think they can get a big result and, you know, take momentum forward into the Carabao Cup against Manchester United. You can't dwell on this too much. Had they played badly against Dortmund and had a bit of a thump, and then, yeah, different story. But look, they played well. And it's almost like a striker. If a striker is still getting into the positions and not scoring, at least he's still getting in the positions. If you lose a game and you lose it with a good performance, at least you're still getting the good performance. The good habits are there. And it was just a bit of bad luck. Even the goalkeeper from Borussia Dortmund, Koval, admitted after the game in the mix zone, saying, you know, Newcastle suffered the bad luck with the crossbar, hitting the crossbar twice in the latter stages. So disappointing on that score. Dortmund players were very respectful about Newcastle when they were speaking in the mix zone. They had a lot of praise for Newcastle, and I think they know that the second leg is going to be extremely difficult. So we've got that to look forward to. It's still exciting, you know. If Newcastle had been top now with 7 points today, we'd be delighted. But we'd probably be thinking this is probably a bit too easy. But look, it was never going to be easy, and they've got to now move on. They've got to get something at Wolves, and then they can focus on the other cups after that. So a tough run of games coming up, but a tough run of games behind Newcastle. Eddie Howe said it last night. At this level, you know what it's going to be like, and it's going to be difficult. So on the injury front, Jacob Murphy going to be out with a dislocated shoulder. I actually felt for him really bad last night. I seen when they were sort of wrapping his arm in his shirt to try and protect him a bit. And yeah, when he got back on his feet, he screamed in frustration because he knew he was in such good form, and just comes at such a bad time. It's such cruel luck on Jacob Murphy. I really feel for the guy. And Eddie Howe does as well. I spoke to him in the press conference about it. So Jacob Murphy, I don't know. It could be the month or 2. I don't know. We'll have to wait and get full confirmation on that. For Alexander Isak, unspecified time limit on that. We'll have to wait and see. It was a groin injury. The shock news was Elliot Anderson's back injury. Eddie Howe telling the press about that last night. And then obviously the Tonali ban. So in a blink of an eye, suddenly Newcastle 4 players down. Going into a tough run of games. But the positives, Joe Willock's coming back into fitness. He did a little session last night after the game. So he's going to be, you know, pushing back to full strength. Joe Linton's just back from injury as well. So 2 big pluses there in midfield. I still think Newcastle got enough firepower in the final third. Callum Wilson, Anthony Gordon, Miguel Almiron. You know, they've got plenty of quality in abundance. So it's going to be tight, but I think it's just a case of put this one behind us, move on to the next game against Wolves, and hopefully after that, some success in the Carabao Cup at Man United. But yeah, tough night for Newcastle, but one I think they'll take positives from, they can learn from it, and hopefully move on in the next few weeks to bigger and better.